when two members of the U.S. National Guard were shot in Washington, D.C. in broad daylight.
Two members of the National Guard have been shot here in Washington.
It happened just 2 blocks away from the White House.
It was within about an hour Donald Trump responded online with anger, calling out the animal responsible and how he would pay a very steep price. Within about 7 hours, he would deliver this message to all Americans from Mar-a-Lago in Florida.
This heinous assault was an act of evil, an act of hatred, and an act of terror. It was a crime against our entire nation. It was a crime against humanity.
And within just 90 seconds of beginning that address, Trump would make explicitly clear how he would be focusing this anger.
I can report tonight that based on the best available information, the Department of Homeland Security is confident that the suspect in custody is a foreigner who entered our country from Afghanistan, a hellhole on earth.
Let me explain where all of this is coming from. We've come to learn a lot fairly quickly about the alleged shooter in this case, because immediately after the attack, he was himself shot and carried away on a stretcher.
They had a person pinned on the ground yelling at him to stay down, and there was broken glass in the bus stop.
The FBI would identify him as Rahmanullah Lakhanwal, 29 years old, allegedly drove across the country to carry out this targeted shooting, originally landing in the U.S. from Afghanistan a few years ago.
He was flown in by the Biden administration in September 2021 on those infamous flights that everybody was talking about.
Trump is alluding to two things here. The first, what has roundly been described as the botched and chaotic American withdrawal from the war in Afghanistan, after having boots on the ground for 20 years.
Desperate to flee Taliban rule, Afghans are resorting to this, grasping at U.S. military aircraft and risking their lives.
Because when the Taliban recaptured Afghanistan's capital in 2021, pulling Americans out of harm's way was one problem. The other was how to rescue those Afghans who had spent years cooperating with American troops, serving as interpreters, drivers, informants, working on American bases or military hospitals. Sometimes even, as was reportedly the case with Rahmanullah Lakhanwal, they worked within CIA-backed paramilitary groups. But they all ran the same risk, which was to be branded by the Taliban as a collaborator. That could spell death for them and their families.
Thousands of Afghans who work for the U.S. government are now desperately trying to flee that country any way they can. They are in hiding, and some moving multiple times a day.
So this chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, that happened under Joe Biden's watch. The link Trump is drawing, though, is to point out that the alleged shooter was flown in
on those infamous flights that everybody was talking about.
Those infamous flights were part of Operation Allies Welcome, an effort to actually bring nearly 100,000 vulnerable Afghans to the United States, allowing them to stay for 2 years. Many, nearly half, were even given permanent residency. After all, the U.S. reasoned it couldn't just abandon them.
We're going to do everything that we can to provide safe evacuation for our Afghan allies, partners, and Afghans who might be targeted because of their association with the United States.
But in two important ways, the scale of the operation would balloon, because in the end, it would actually be closer to 200,000 Afghans who would eventually resettle in the U.S. under Operation Allies Welcome. But some Afghans would also stay longer than the program itself allowed for example, by using the time to claim asylum. And this would include, according to Trump, the man who would eventually, at the time I record this, shoot and critically wound 2 members of the National Guard.
His status was extended under legislation signed by President Biden, a disastrous president, the worst in the history of our country.
What Trump is doing now is to argue that by virtue of this shooting, that nearly 200,000 Afghans admitted to the U.S. under the Biden administration are now potential security threats.
We must now re-examine every single alien who has entered our country from Afghanistan under Biden, and we must take all necessary measures to ensure the removal of any alien from any country who does not belong here or add benefit to our country.
And this directive includes the immediate suspension of all immigration requests from Afghans, pending a review of security and vetting protocols.
Nobody knew who was coming in. Nobody knew anything about it. We're not going to put up with these kind of assaults on law and order by people who shouldn't even be in our country.
So let's consider this, starting with what I hope is just plainly true, that in any group of 200,000 people, there is a great range of people, right? The U.S. evacuated from Afghanistan journalists, human rights activists, humanitarian workers, and thousands of people and their families who risked a great deal to protect U.S. soldiers. But at the same time, the Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General, the watchdog under Joe Biden, found that Customs and Border Protection admitted or paroled evacuees who were not fully vetted into the United States. And as a result, DHS may have admitted or paroled individuals into the United States who pose a risk to national security and the safety of local communities. And just to give you one of the simplest examples of these incomplete vets stemming from the fact of simply having incomplete records, the report found that Afghans admitted to the U.S. under this program did not always know their date of birth. So sometimes the processing agent would just enter what amounted to a guess based on what the evacuee did know. As a result, it was challenging for DHS to fully screen and vet the evacuees. The FBI under Donald Trump also issued a report this year because they too played a critical role in screening and vetting. Key to their central finding, according to the FBI, the need to immediately evacuate Afghans overtook the normal processes required to determine whether individuals attempting to enter the United States pose a threat to national security, which increased the risk that bad actors could try to exploit the expedited evacuation. And specifically, that the Terrorist Screening Center identified 55 Afghan evacuees as of May 2023 who were either already on the terrorist watch list but still made it to a U.S. port of entry as part of the evacuation, or were added to the watch list during the evacuation and resettlement in the United States.
The last administration let in 20 million unknown and unvetted foreigners from all over the world, from places that you don't want to even know about. No country can tolerate such a risk to our very survival.
I think I could say two fairly uncontroversial things about Donald Trump's reaction to the shooting of two members of the National Guard in Washington, D.C. His reaction is both broad.
We must now re-examine every single alien who has entered our country from Afghanistan under Biden. If they can't love our country, we don't want them.
And it is also defiant.
That is why tonight I can announce that I have directed the Department of War to mobilize an additional 500 troops to help protect our capital city. We will make America totally safe again.
The question is, though, is Trump turning the temperature up or down? The Department of Homeland Security believes this was a targeted attack on the National Guard, which, if true, means the investigators will have to at least consider the possibility that the motive for this attack relates to Trump's decision to deploy the Guard in the first place.
Thousands of people flooded the streets of D.C. today to once again protest the president's deployment of National Guard troops and takeover of D.C. police.
The president says he's going to send 800 National Guard into D.C. People here say that is unwarranted, it's unnecessary.
So, if we're trying to gauge where exactly this goes from here, Trump will have to reconcile whether his next move provides safety or undermines it by doubling down.